Before we advance to the vid feed, please lend your support with a like, activate subscription protocols, engage the hype function, and share in the comment commune whether you would join the Tauva. Your cooperation strengthens the greater good.
I never imagined I would die fighting side by side with aliens. Yet here I am, knee-deep in mud on an alien world, pulse rifle hot in my hands, and I'm shooting at the soldiers I once called my brothers. Last bolts tear through the air, bright lances of energy seeking our blood. The sky is choked with smoke and the stench of ozone. The ground shudders from the bombardment of Imperial artillery. My heart thunders in my chest as I press myself against the trench wall, listening to the rasp of my own ragged breathing inside my helmet. Overhead, a streak of blue armor dashes past one of my Tau comrades, a fire warrior, vaulting over the trench with graceful agility. He pops off a burst from his rifle, the sharp crack of a plasma round cutting through the din. I steal a glance over the parapet. Across the blasted killing field, I glimpse the shapes of Imperial guardsmen in their familiar flak armor and muddy greatcoats, advancing under the cover of their heavy guns. Once upon a time, I wore those colors. Once I was one of them. Emperor knows, those guardsmen trudging toward us weren't so different from me and my friends a few years back. Just poor bastards thrown into a fight they barely understood. If fate had been kinder, maybe we'd be sharing a drink instead of trading gunfire. But fate is not kind. The no man's land between us is already littered with the charred wrecks of drones and the crumpled forms of the fallen, both human and Tau. A downed Imperial Sentinel walker sputters flames in a crater, illuminating the grotesque tableau of war. The sight would have turned my stomach once. Now I grit my teeth and push past it, focusing on the living enemies still charging. A mortar shell screams as it descends, and I duck instinctively. The explosion rains dirt and shrapnel just a few meters to my left. I feel the tremor through my boots. A strangled cry tells me someone didn't duck fast enough. I grit my teeth and force myself to peek out again, leveling my rifle. My hands move on their own, training, taking over, acquire target, hold breath, fire. The pulse rifle kicks against my shoulder, and a brilliant bolt of cyan energy spits outward. Through the haze, I see an Imperial soldier collapse, armor melted where my shot hit home. Emperor, forgive me, I think automatically, even though I know he would consider this unforgivable. How did it come to this? I, who once swore oaths to the God Emperor of mankind, am now a Gue'vesa, a human fighting for the Tau Empire's greater good. A traitor in the eyes of the Imperium. The worst kind of heretic. If any of those guardsmen out there knew my name, they'd curse it even as they bled out on this foreign soil. And if the Inquisition ever gets hold of me, well, better not to dwell on that. There's enough incoming fire and screaming in the present to worry about. My ears ring with the aftermath of another nearby blast. I shake my head to clear it. Across the trench, one of my squad mates, a fellow human auxiliary, catches my eye and shouts something, pointing upward. I follow his gesture and feel my blood run cold. High above, through the swirling smoke, the ominous silhouette of an Imperial Valkyrie dropship is swooping low, its vector engines howling. It's lining up for a strafing run, or maybe deploying more troops behind us. Either way, bad news. I press my back harder against the dirt wall and feel a panicked laugh bubble in my throat. It's a strange, detached moment of clarity in the chaos. Me and a bunch of blue-skinned aliens about to be overrun or incinerated by the very forces I once called for backup. There's a bitter irony there, if you like that sort of humor. I always did have a slightly twisted sense of humor. Just another lovely day in the service of the greater good, I mutter under my breath, voice dripping with wry sarcasm, inaudible under the roar of battle. A tiny part of me still can't believe this is my life now. But it is, and I'd better make peace with it quick. Before the Valkyrie can open fire, a shrill tone in my helmet communicator cuts through the noise our cadre commander's voice, calm and firm, speaking Tau with a clipped accent. Guevesa, fall back to secondary trenches. Kaoyon, Kaoyon. The killing blow strategy. Lure them in, then counter-ambush. Standard Tau tactics. I feel a hand on my shoulder pulling me. It's Jaren, my squad lead, another human like me, face streaked with mud and blood, eyes wide with urgency. We scramble up and start running down the length of the trench. My legs burn, muscles protesting after hours of fighting, but fear and adrenaline drive me on. Around us, the Tau are also withdrawing in leaps and bounds, disciplined even in retreat. A cadre of battlesuits thunders past above ground, their jetpacks flaring as they reposition. Drones zip overhead like mechanical hornets, spitting blue bolts at the incoming Imperials to cover us. I slip on a spent shell casing and nearly tumble. Jaren grabs my arm and yanks me along before I get trampled by a retreating Kroot carnivore, the hulking avian-like alien letting out a feral hiss as he bounds by with rifle in claw. The smell of its sweat and the faint coppery tang of blood on its hide hits my nose, even over the reek of promethium fumes. I cough and keep moving. We reach a communication trench and dive in. I'm gasping for breath, heart hammering. I risk another glance back. The Imperials are swarming over our former position now. I can make out their battle cries, even individual voices if I focus cursing us as traitors, shouting litanies to the Emperor. There's one voice louder than the rest, bellowing orders, probably a commissar whipping them on. Typical. I feel a sharp twist of anger and something like sadness in my gut at that distant, all-too-familiar battle hymn. It used to be my rallying cry, too. Used to be. A lot has changed. It's almost enough to make me wonder how I ended up here, how a regular guy from the Astra Militarum wound up fighting against his own kin alongside aliens. But I know exactly how it happened. It's a long story, full of decisions, desperation, and a fair share of regret. But it's mine. And if by some miracle I survive this madness today, I might get the chance to tell it properly. For now, though, I'll have to settle for starting at the beginning, or close enough to it. My name is Janus Doran, or at least it used to be, back when I wore the Imperial Aquila on my helmet and thought I was one of the good guys. I was born a subject of the Imperium of Man, like untold billions of others. Grew up on a dusty agri-world nobody's heard of, spending my youth toiling in the fields and reciting the litany of the Emperor's light every evening. I enlisted in the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, partly out of patriotism, mostly to escape that dead-end life. The recruiters promised glory, a chance to serve the Emperor among the stars. What I got was mud, fear, and a lost gun that jammed every other shot. But I served well enough, kept my head down, did as I was told. A few years in, I found myself fighting on the Eastern Fringe, part of a grand imperial crusade to push back the expanding Tau Empire. We were told the Tau were soulless Xenos, propagators of a blasphemous ideology called the Greater Good. We were to show them the Emperor's wrath. I was a good soldier. I swallowed the propaganda like ration gruel. I remember landing on some backwater planet. Its name hardly matters now, just another contested world in the Damocles Gulf. The sky was green, the air too humid, and everything stank of rotting vegetation and ozone from constant energy weapon discharges. We fought there for months, trench warfare against the blue-skinned aliens and their allies. It was truly unlike fighting heretics or orcs, which I'd experienced before. The Tau were disciplined, high-tech, and annoyingly fond of trickery and ambush. They didn't fight like we did. While we charged lines and bellowed war cries, they fell back, regrouped, and hit us from angles we didn't expect. They'd snipe our officers with pinpoint plasma shots and melt our tanks with weapons that could punch through ceramite armor. I'll never forget the first time I saw a Tau battlesuit up close. An XD-8 crisis suit, as I learned it's called. It loomed out of the morning mist like a giant made of bronze, jetpack screaming, and unleashed a torrent of plasma fire into our platoon's flank. Men were vaporized before my eyes. The thing moved with an agility that defied its size, outflanking us in seconds. We eventually drove it off with concentrated heavy bolter fire, but not before it single-handedly decimated an entire heavy weapons squad. That memory stuck with me, the sheer power the Tau could bring to bear with just a single pilot in an armored suit. The Tau had other allies too. We faced Quicksilver-scaled Kroot mercenaries who stalked through the jungles and leapt into our trenches at night, slitting throats with machete-like blades before we even knew they were there. We learned to fear the dark on that forsaken world. On edge and exhausted, some of our own started cracking. One evening, after a brutal ambush where we lost half a squad to a pair of stealthy Tau sharpshooters, a young trooper in my unit broke down. When orders came to advance yet again into what felt like certain death, he froze, sobbing that he couldn't do it. Our commissar, a scarred man with bionic eyes named Vorhen, didn't hesitate. Right in front of us, he drew his bolt pistol and executed the boy on the spot for cowardice. Blew his brains out all over my boots. Thus to the faithless, Vorhen snarled at us stunned survivors, as if he'd done something righteous instead of just murdering a terrified 18-year-old who'd seen too much. I remember vomiting in the mud after that, rage and horror swirling in my gut. It steeled me in a different way. I realized I feared our own commissar as much as I feared the Xenos beyond the wire, perhaps more. Yet somehow I pressed on. We all did. The brutality of that jungle war forged a certain fatalism in us. Every dawn I still lived felt like a blessing, or a curse depending on my mood that day. We lost a lot of good folks on that Emperor-forsaken dirtball, but we also gave as good as we got. Emperor help me, I was proud of surviving each day. My regiment, the 117th Cadian Iron Wall, though most of us weren't true Cadians, just replacements from wherever, was decimated by the end. Out of thousands, only a few hundred of us were left clinging to a scrap of jungle and mud by the time the higher-ups decided enough was enough. The war had ground to a stalemate, and apparently something worse was looming on the horizon, elsewhere in the galaxy. Tyranids, I later heard whispers of. In the grand strategic calculus of the Imperium, we were deemed acceptable losses, pawns to be abandoned so the kings and bishops of Segmentum Command could rush off to face that new threat. Whatever the cause, the order came down abruptly. Full retreat. The fleet was pulling out. We were to disengage and evacuate immediately. We couldn't believe it. After all the blood we spilled, all the friends we buried in shallow graves on that Emperor-forsaken world, High Command was just leaving? Orders were orders. Those of us who could still walk trudged toward the dropships and shuttles, carrying our wounded. We fought rearguard actions against the pursuing Tau forces just to reach the evacuation zones. The skies were filled with fire as Navy flyers dueled Tau aircraft. It was chaos. I was with a group of about 50 guardsmen holding an outpost on a jungle hill, waiting for extraction that never came. Over the Vox, we heard frantic, fragmented messages our forces were overwhelmed. Lifts were leaving orbit in a hurry. The last transmission from our regiment's command was the one that burned into my mind. All remaining units, may the Emperor be with you. You're on your own. then just static, on our own. Abandoned, the Imperial Navy and what was left of the Crusade fleet translated to warp and left orbit within hours. They left hundreds, maybe thousands of us behind, scattered across battle zones. The Tau ceasefire offer came not long after. Surrounded and leaderless, with no hope of relief, our choices were simple: surrender to the Xenos or die pointlessly. Some of my comrades still wanted to fight to the last round, die for the Emperor in a glorious last stand and all that. A few did just that, gunned down when they broke cover to charge the enemy one final time, screaming his name. But most of us just wanted to live. We laid down arms. I remember tossing my last gun, the one I'd dutifully maintained for years, into the mud at my feet. My hands were shaking. I told myself it wasn't cowardice, it was pragmatism. The Emperor had left us to rot. Maybe he had bigger problems to worry about, or maybe our commanders were just incompetent. Either way, we were expendable. Always had been. The Tau commander who accepted our surrender was a tall one in red battlesuit armor. His name was Chasso Chauvin. We learned later the Imperium called him Commander Farsight. I'll never forget how he looked standing there on the ruined battlements of our outpost, flanked by crisis suits and hovering drones, addressing us in surprisingly decent Gothic. His voice was calm, almost compassionate, as he gave us a choice. I remember Farsight, Oshova, raising one gauntleted hand, palm out in a gesture almost like an imperial benediction. "Brave soldiers of the Imperium," he called us, voice resonant and oddly respectful. "You have fought with honor. Your commanders have left you to die. I offer you an alternative: life. Lay down your arms, and you will be cared for. You will have food, shelter, and purpose once more, serving the greater good." We stood dumbfounded. I heard one of our sergeants bark back hoarsely, "We would never betray the Emperor," more out of reflex than conviction. Farsight tilted his head, almost sad. "The Emperor," he replied, "has already betrayed you, my friend." Murmurs rippled through our group at that. Heresy, our training screamed. But the truth of it hung in the air amidst the buzzing of Tau drones and the crackle of distant gunfire. The Tau commander continued, "Join us, and you will be treated fairly. Or you may remain our captives until this war ends, if it ends before more blood is shed." He didn't need to voice the third option, the unspoken, or die right here. But we all heard it nonetheless. One by one, our weapons thudded into the mud. My last gun was one of the first to drop. As it hit the ground, I felt a strange mix of shame and relief washing over me. There would be no grand last stand for us today, just the uncertain mercy of aliens. I had expected to be executed or tortured or thrown into some camp. Instead, here was this alien commander offering us a hand. It was baffling. I recall standing there with a dozen fellow guardsmen, all of us filthy, starving, exhausted, exchanging uncertain glances. We didn't trust it. We were sure there was a catch. But we also didn't have any better prospects. One by one, under the watchful eyes of our former enemies, we agreed. Becoming a turncoat was easier and harder than you'd think. Easier because all it took was saying yes. Harder because of everything that came after that word. The Tau treated our injuries and gave us real food, better stuff than the corpse starch rations we'd choked down for years. They even let the more religious among us keep our Aquila pendants and pocket prayer books, to my surprise. I later learned it was deliberate, a show of good faith. They promised we could worship the Emperor freely, so long as we didn't preach hatred against the Tau. At the time, that concession felt like mercy. In hindsight, it was clever strategy. We soon discovered that praying openly to the God Emperor in Tau territory drew suspicious looks and occasional lectures about tolerance and the greater good. But nobody was executed for it, at least, and that was a damned sight more lenience than any imperial commissar would ever grant for deviating from the creed. They moved us to a relocation camp on a world called Taros, not Taros. This was Tros with an apostrophe, a small moon in their space designated for processing new Guevesa, which is their word for humans like us, who join them. It literally means human helper in their tongue. I can't say I enjoyed being branded a helper to aliens, but it was better than prisoner or corpse. At first, I kept expecting some sort of brainwashing or indoctrination device to carve the imperial loyalty out of my skull. Some of the more paranoid in our group whispered that the ethereals, the Tau spiritual leaders, would mind control us with pheromones or psychic tricks. I can't say I ever felt anything like that. What I did feel was the slow creep of normalcy. The days in that camp turned to weeks, then months. We were treated more or less like new recruits rather than prisoners, given new clothes, simple, comfortable uniforms without all the ostentatious skulls and purity seals the Imperium loves. We had schedules, physical training to keep us in shape, classes in the Tau language and culture to ease our integration, and surprisingly free time where we could do as we pleased within the confines of the camp. Some of the guys even started playing regimental ball games in the yard, with the Tau guards joining in for fun. Can you picture it? Humans and Tau laughing together over a ball game. I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't seen Corporal Mikhail, who once swore he'd never befriend a Xeno, teaching a curious young fire warrior how to toss a ball properly. It was at that camp that I first met Jaren. He had been a sergeant in another regiment left behind like us, the 233rd Nivan Rangers. We bonded over a mutual love of Tana tea of all things, a mildly caffeinated drink the Tau provided that was way better than imperial recaf sludge. Jaren was quick to accept our new reality. He was older than me by a decade and had fought in countless wars. Kid, he told me, even though I was in my 20s. I guess to him I seemed like a kid. I've had enough of watching good lads die for nothing. Maybe these blue boys have the right idea, eh? At least they give a damn about their own. I was more hesitant to sing praises of the Tau at first, but I couldn't argue with his logic. The Imperium had left us to die as if we were nothing. The Tau, for whatever reason, had picked us up, patched us together, and given us a chance to be something other than corpses. Not everyone in our batch was so content. There were those who clung to their hatred and faith. Among them was a man named Hale, Acadian like me. Hale and I had served in the same squad back on that jungle world. We bled in the same foxholes. I considered him a friend then. Hale took the Tau up on their offer only out of necessity. From day one in the camp, he refused to learn their language, scoffed at their talk of unity. At night, I'd sometimes hear him reciting the imperial catechisms under his breath like a mantra, as if to keep the Xeno influence at bay. We tried to watch out for each other like old times, but there was a growing rift between Hale and those of us who thought maybe, just maybe, life under the Tau wouldn't be hell. The ethereals and their aides deemed us adequately re-educated after about 3 months on Taros. That word scared the hell out of us at first, though in practice it was more like schooling than torture. They taught us the principles of the greater good. A lot of it sounded like idealistic blather at first. Every being has a place and purpose, working together for the betterment of all. It was so drastically different from the Imperium's dogma that I struggled to process it. In the Guard, I was taught my life was meaningless except as fuel for the Emperor's goals. We were meat for the grinder, and our highest hope was to die usefully. The Tao told us that every individual has value, that a soldier fights not because he's forced by fear, but because he wants to protect his community, his fellow beings. It sounded nice, almost too nice to be true. Perhaps parts of it were just propaganda of a different flavor. But I saw with my own eyes that Tau commanders genuinely cared about their troops, both Tau and alien auxilia. They strategized to minimize casualties when possible, whereas an Imperial general would sooner throw 1,000 more bodies into the meat grinder and then execute a few survivors for good measure. It was a lot to take in. I won't lie and say I became an instant convert to their philosophy. But I listened and I pondered, and bit by bit my cynicism toward them thawed. That's not to say I started spouting Tao mantras or forgot the God Emperor entirely. I didn't. But I began to understand that the greater good wasn't some mind control trick. It was simply another way of thinking, one that treated us as something more than cannon fodder. Frankly, that was refreshing. At first, every instinct in me rebelled. The Imperial infantryman's uplifting primer, the little field handbook every guardsman carries, had taught me that the only good alien is a dead alien, and that to show mercy to Xenos was heresy. Yet, here I was, breaking bread with the same creatures I'd been indoctrinated to hate. The sky didn't fall. My soul wasn't damned on the spot. In fact, I found the bread they shared with me tasted fine. Like actual bread, not corpse starch. It was a small thing, but it made me question other truths I'd held. After our orientation period, they started training us to actually serve in their ranks. We were issued weapons. Some of us got to keep our trusty las guns initially. Others were given sleek Tau pulse rifles. I remember the day I first fired a pulse rifle on the range. Throne, what a weapon. The kick surprised me, and the power. Gods, the power. A single shot from that thing could blast apart a rockcrete target that would have laughed off a last bolt. I felt almost giddy, and then oddly ashamed of feeling giddy, like I was betraying the Guard by preferring alien tech. But practical is practical. Hale, of course, stubbornly kept his battered las gun, even when offered a superior pulse carbine. Las is good enough for a true guardsman, he insisted. Never mind that he wasn't a guardsman anymore by official standings. Old habits die hard. The Tau integrated us into something they called the Fire Caste Auxiliary. We weren't formal fire warriors. Humans can't be part of the Tau caste system, but we were a parallel unit. We kept some of our old squad structures among ourselves, with human sergeants, now called Guevesa Ui, leading human troops, Guevesala. They did assign a few Tau mentors to oversee larger formations, mostly to coordinate with the rest of the army. Some mentors were wary of us at first. I overheard a Tau officer expressing concern that arming humans was a security risk, but we gradually earned a bit of respect. Our new superiors made a point to publicly commend human aux units after exercises to show trust. Maybe it was calculated, but it felt good to be valued even a little. I spent the next few years as a Gue'vesa soldier of the Tau Empire. They resettled many of us on frontier colonies, places where human populations were small or non-existent, so we could start fresh. My new home became a colony world named Velka in the Tau's Velkhan Sept, a dusty, sepia-toned planet under twin suns. It wasn't paradise, but the living conditions were decent. I even had my own hab room, shared with 2 other humans, but still better than a 40-man barrack tent in the Imperial Guard. We auxiliaries were stationed there to help guard the colony and nearby Sept border. We drilled regularly and occasionally were deployed for minor peacekeeping, deterring pirates, putting down a few raiders, even helping the locals with disaster relief. when wildfires swept through a farming district. Honestly, it felt bizarre to be using my soldiering skills for something other than war. Useful, even honorable in a way that the Guard seldom was. Not that war didn't find us. There were a few skirmishes, mostly against stubborn human insurgents who rejected Tau rule, or against marauding orc war bands testing the borders. I saw combat again sooner than I'd have liked. But now I fought alongside beings I'd once aimed to kill. I remember a night ambush by an orc commando raid on one of our supply depots. I found myself back to back with a Tau fire warrior, covering each other in the flicker of burning promethium. I saved his life when an orc almost cleaved him in two, emptied half a magazine into the green brute. After the dust settled, the Tau soldier clasped my shoulder and gave a respectful bow. It was the first time I truly felt accepted, that brief, silent gesture of thanks from someone who wasn't even human. Bit by bit, I started to feel something like pride again. Not the blind, patriotic fervor I'd had as an imperial youth. This was more personal. Pride in my squad, in keeping each other alive, human or Tau or otherwise. Pride that maybe, just maybe, we were building something a little less awful than what I left behind. As for Hale, he stayed with us through all this. Physically, at least. He fought when fighting was needed, took orders from Tau officers with a sullen glare, but followed them nonetheless. He was brave, I'll give him that, charging orcs fearlessly, volunteering for dangerous patrols. Maybe he figured if he died heroically in battle, the Emperor might still consider him faithful. He never quite bonded with the rest of us, or with the Tau. While some of us picked up bits of the Tau language, or made friends among our new comrades, Hale kept to himself. In the mess hall, he sat at the corner table, eating the human-style rations in silence, while others of us traded jokes with the aliens. Over time, I confess I drifted apart from him. It's hard to stay close with someone who thinks you're damning your soul by adapting to your new life. I heard rumors that he and a handful of like-minded malcontents formed a little prayer group, meeting privately in one of their quarters to recite the Imperial Creed. Technically, this wasn't forbidden. The Tau pretended to allow our faith, but they definitely didn't encourage gathering in the Emperor's name. When that group was discovered by a water-caste overseer, I heard there was a stern talking to about respecting the local guidelines. No punishment beyond that, though one of the ethereals later gave a speech, gently reminding everyone that clinging to old imperial dogmas could hold us back from true unity. I remember that distinctly because it made me shift uncomfortably in my seat, feeling called out even though I'd not attended those meetings. Hale? He sat stone-faced, glaring at the floor. A couple of years went by. We became what the Tau considered model Guevesa. Some of us even had families. One of the guys married a local human woman on Velka and had a kid. Another adopted an orphan from one of the war zones. The Tau didn't object. More human births under their rule was just more citizens for the Empire, I guess. Myself, I stayed single. This new life was complicated enough without adding a family to worry about. And honestly, a part of me felt like I didn't deserve that comfort. Not after all I'd done and been through. Still, there were moments of relative peace and almost happiness. Drinking Tau rice wine with my squad after a successful operation, or laughing as Jaren tried to teach a Kroot the lyrics to an old Imperial marching song. That Kroot's gravelly voice mangling high Gothic words was something else. I started writing a journal too, a habit I'd never had before. It helped me sort through the whirl of conflicting feelings, lingering guilt, newfound hope, fear of the future. I addressed some entries to the Emperor as if writing to an old friend I'd grown apart from. I doubted he listened, but it was more for my own sake, a way to say this is who I am now, for better or worse. Sometimes I even scribbled unsent letters to my mother back on that distant farm world, words she would never read, thoughts I could never truly send. It was just another way to feel connected to a life that had drifted out of reach. That, more or less, is how I ended up here, on the precipice between two worlds. No longer a loyal son of the Imperium, not quite fully accepted as part of the Tau either, but something in between. A soldier of the greater good, with human flaws intact. And that is how, a few weeks ago, I found myself deployed to the world of Ximyen, a frontier planet at the edge of Tau space, once an Imperial colony and now a prized gem of the Tau Empire. A place where the Imperium and Tau have butted heads before. Command suspected that the Imperium might try to take it back someday, and that day seemed to be drawing close. They sent our Guevesa unit to bolster the planet's defenses and, perhaps, to show the local human populace that folks like us could thrive under the Tau banner. Ximyen is where I've been living for the past month, doing my duty day in and day out. Garrison work mostly, training drills, patrols, a bit of community outreach to win hearts and minds. It's a temperate planet with broad savannas and a few hive cities that have been under new management since the last war. Life here had been almost peaceful, until recently. Peace never lasts in this galaxy, and a part of me, veteran guardsman that I am, always knew it. We all did. Which brings me back to the present, back to the trenches, the gunfire, and the onslaught of those who were once my comrades. But before the shells began falling on Ximyen, before the alarms and the blood, there were the days leading up to it. The calm before the storm, you might say. The day-to-day life of a human soldier in the Tau Empire on a world bracing for war. And it's worth telling you about that life, my day-to-day existence, as it was before everything went to hell. Because the routines, the small moments, the ordinary days, that's what really highlights how different my path has become from what it once was. And maybe it will help you understand why I'm here at all. Scene transition to a calm morning at the garrison a few days before the battle. Soft ambient sounds of a morning camp, distant PA announcements, murmured conversations, perhaps alien birds chirping. Morning begins not with the blare of a shin or the bark of a commissar, but with a gentle chiming tone that pulses through the barracks. The Tau call it a wake cycle harmonic. To me, it's basically an alarm clock, but a polite one. It filters through my dreams and draws me to bleary consciousness in the dim, bluish half-light of our quarters. I sit up on my bunk, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Across from me, Jaren is already awake, lacing up his boots. Even in his 50s, that man rises like clockwork before dawn. Old habits from decades of soldiering. Some things the Tau haven't trained out of us, and probably never will. On the top bunk above him, our resident jokester Malke is still snoring softly, one arm dangling over the side. Not for long. Right on cue, a small hovering drone zips into the barracks room through the open door, emitting a brisk series of flashes with its status lights. Our cue to get moving. It makes a soft, churring sound, almost like a mechanical bird. Malke groans and flops over, muttering a curse about damned flying alarm clocks. I can't help but smirk. In the Imperial Guard, wake-up calls usually involved a sergeant kicking your cot or a klaxon loud enough to wake the dead. Here, we get soothing chimes and a drone politely reminding stragglers. Malke might grumble, but I know he doesn't miss the old way either. I swing my legs out of bed and stand. The floor is cool metal plating, but far cleaner than any barracks floor I've known before. We keep it that way ourselves. Part of Tau routine is cleanliness and order, something that at first felt strange to us grubby guardsmen. There's a subtle scent in the air, some kind of citrusy cleanser or incense. Way better than the mildew and sweat stench that pervaded the canvas tents back in my guard days. We dress in our fatigues quickly. Our standard attire is a mix of imperial and Tau design. Durable khaki trousers and jackets reminiscent of Imperial Guard uniforms, minus the Aquila insignias, combined with lightweight chest armor plates of Tau make, colored a dull gray blue, which are much more comfortable than the flak vests I used to wear. They even have integrated temperature regulators, a luxury my spine appreciates on chilly mornings like this. We tighten the straps and pull on our boots, each lost in our own thoughts. I adjust a shoulder guard that still sticks a bit, a remnant of an orc blade scuff, and then grab my helmet. Our helmets are hybrid designs, imperial pattern shapes retrofitted with Tau optics visors and comlinks. Once mine is on, I get a neat overlay in my right eye's display, feeding me target data and my squad's vital signs. Things the Imperium would never trust a grunt with. The Tau just hand out like candy. One of the many little differences. The helmet's fit is snug but comfortable. I remember my old Imperial helm always pinched at the temples. Jaren is already by the doorway, helmet under arm, waiting with the patience of a long-suffering mentor. "Rise and shine, Mal," he calls to the top bunk. "Greater good isn't gonna serve itself." Malka lets out an exaggerated sigh and finally clambers down. He's a lean, dark-haired fellow, younger than me by a few years, with quick eyes that are always looking for something to laugh about. "Yes, sir, right away, sir," he mumbles theatrically as he tugs on his boots. "Wouldn't want to keep the greater good waiting. Might get a demerit on my harmony score." Jaren chuckles. "Just get your gear, wise ass." There's affection in his tone. In another life, Jaren could have been one of those crusty but kindly drill instructors, the kind that grumble at you but secretly make sure you get an extra bread ration when you need it. We step out into the corridor as a squad, joining the flow of other Guevesa emerging from their quarters. The hall is illuminated with the soft white glow of lumen panels. It's quiet, just the shuffling of boots and some hushed conversations. No one yelling at us to form up. We know the schedule. First stop, the refectory for breakfast. The garrison's layout is efficient. Our barracks wing connects straight to a common mess hall. It's a large chamber with long tables, actually decently comfortable chairs, not the backless metal stools the guard issued, and a serving counter manned by a pair of stout earth-cast technicians and their helper drones. They greet us with polite nods. The scent of hot food wafts through the air, making my stomach rumble. We grab trays and get in line. Breakfast today looks like a kind of porridge made from tau grains mixed with dried fruit. Beside it, a square of nutrient-packed bread and a cup of something that passes for coffee. The humans on Ximeyen have started growing a substitute bean locally, and with a bit of tinkering, the Earthcast managed a brew that's surprisingly good. I take a cautious sip as I shuffle along, strong, bitter, just how I like it. We settle at a table with the rest of our unit. It's a mix of familiar faces, 5 other humans plus 2 Tau Fire warriors who act as liaisons. Those 2 sit at our table by choice, something that once would have made me uncomfortable, but now is routine. The taller one is Josen, a Shasui, sergeant equivalent, assigned to coordinate our squad with others. His skin is slate blue, and he's got a thin vertical scar on his forehead, a souvenir from an old battle, though he jokes it's from knocking heads with a particularly angry Kroot. The other Tau with us is Lakora, a younger warrior who requested a post with the Guevesa to improve his Gothic language skills. He's quiet but observant, always listening keenly when we talk in our human slang. We eat and chat in a low murmur. The conversation is easy, covering last night's card game. Malki cleaned us out with a lucky streak that had Jaren suspecting him of cheating, which Malka vehemently denied. In truth, it probably wasn't luck at all. Malka has a talent for sleight of hand. I recall Jaren narrowing his eyes as Malka won yet another round of Regicide, an old Imperial card game with an improbable set of Emperor's Mercy cards. Emperor's Mercy, my ass, Jaren grumbled good-naturedly, more like Farsight's trickery. Malky feigned innocence, holding up his palms. Pure chance, I swear. The greater good must be smiling on my hand. We all laughed at that, tension easing for a short while. Even a couple of the Tau nearby cocked their heads in amusement, albeit likely not catching the full nuance. It's funny. A year ago, I wouldn't have imagined sitting around a table with aliens, trading jokes. Now it feels almost normal. One by one, the others trickle in from the serving line and join us except Hale. I notice his absence. Hale usually sits with us in stony silence, shoveling his food quickly before leaving early. But I don't see him this morning. Anyone seen Hale? I ask between spoonfuls of porridge, trying to sound casual. Jaren glances around. Not since muster yesterday. He might be skipping breakfast again. Lakora tilts his head, his brow furrows slightly, a Tau expression of concern. Guevesa hardly often misses morning nourishment cycle, he comments in deliberate but accented high Gothic. It is not healthy practice. He's a night owl, Malk adds with a shrug. Or maybe he just hates the porridge. A weak joke, but a couple of us chuckle. I exchange a look with Jaren. We both know Hale's habits have been erratic lately. The man barely sleeps some nights, and when he does show up, he's surlier than a grox with a toothache, skipping meals, isolating himself. None of it is good. But he's also a grown man and not technically breaking any rules. Hard to drag someone to breakfast at gunpoint. The Tau, for their part, have been patient with him, treating his aloofness as a cultural adjustment issue. Back in the Guard, a soldier acting like Hale would have been beaten by a commissar or thrown in the brig for insubordination. Here, they gently encourage him to participate, which only seems to make him withdraw more. I push thoughts of Hale from my mind for now and finish my meal. The porridge is actually not bad, slightly sweet, and the fruit bits are tart. Definitely beats the flavorless nutrient sludge that passed for breakfast in my old Cadian unit. I remember those days well, choking down whatever we could while already sweating under a morning sun, a commissar prowling behind us ready to shoot any man who didn't show enough zeal. Here, there's just the hum of drones clearing empty plates and the murmur of conversation. A soft tone sounds from the ceiling speakers, marking the end of the meal period. We clean up after ourselves, depositing trays for the drones to wash. Time for the morning briefing and drills. We assemble in the courtyard outside the barracks. It's a wide open space of neatly packed earth and plasteel landing pads. The sky above Xiim Yen is tinged pink and gold as the sun rises. The air smells faintly of alien wildflowers from beyond the base walls, a surprisingly pleasant scent to start a day of soldiering. Our company forms up loosely by squads. There's maybe 50 of us Gue'vesa in total stationed here, plus twice as many Tau fire warriors, and a handful of Kroot mercenaries that linger at the fringes, looking vaguely bored and predatory. The Kroot always give me the creeps first thing in the morning. Tall, spindly, avian-looking aliens with quills and beaks, like something out of a nightmare. But they've proven their worth in a fight, and they've also proven they can stomach the mess hall's synthetic meat stew better than we can. So who am I to judge? At precisely 600, the base intercom clicks on and a voice speaks, projecting across the courtyard. It's not in Gothic, but in the Tau tongue, the melodious, calm tone of Por El Soleil, our watercast administrator. She gives the daily announcements, first in Tau for the benefit of the majority, then repeats in heavily accented Low Gothic for us human troops and any locals listening in. Even now, I find it a bit surreal to hear the day's orders first delivered in an alien language. The content is mundane stuff, but the medium, those flowing Tau syllables, drives home how different my life is now from my time in the Guard. The gist of the announcements: all is well, duty rotations as normal, a gentle reminder to attend cultural exchange classes if we have downtime. That draws a quiet sigh from Malky. He hates those sessions where they make us sing Tao folk songs or practice meditation breathing. There's mention that one of the Earthcast engineers is giving a workshop on drone maintenance for anyone interested, and an encouraging note that ethereal Antoriu himself will be visiting our garrison in a few days for a ceremonial review. That last bit makes everyone straighten a little. An ethereal's presence is a big deal. They're the spiritual leaders of the Tau. Even us humans, outside their caste system, know that when an ethereal shows up, you better be on your best behavior. I've never met Antoriu, but I've seen him from afar. A dignified, robed figure who inspires almost fanatical devotion in the Tau. It's said even we humans might feel a kind of aura around him, a charisma that's hard to resist. If nothing else, his arrival means we'll be spit-shining our boots extra hard soon. After the announcements, the Firecast officer in charge of our base, Shas Elvara, steps forward to give the tactical briefing. Elvara is a no-nonsense veteran with deep-set eyes and a missing left arm, replaced by a mechanical prosthetic that he leaves uncovered, perhaps as a reminder to everyone of what the Imperium cost him. He addresses us in Gothic today, likely for our benefit. Troops of Xim Yen, today's schedule will consist of combat drills focusing on mixed unit cooperation. Guevesa and fire warriors will deploy in simulated defensive positions at 0900 for war games. The scenario: repelling an assault from a mock Imperial Guard force. At that, I trade looks with Jaren. A mock Imperial assault. How quaint. Training for the thing we all suspect is coming, though none of the higher-ups have officially said so. Elvara continues. Additionally, patrols will be doubled in the civilian sectors of the city due to increased reports of unrest. His eyes flick briefly toward us human orcs when he mentions unrest. We know what he means. There have been some scuffles in the streets recently, small protests by pro-Imperial locals. Nothing we couldn't handle, but the brass is being cautious. The briefing wraps up with an admonition to stay vigilant and a final call for the Tauva. The greater good, we all echo it as required, even the humans among us, though our enthusiasm varies. I say it firmly, out of habit now. Across the yard, I see a few lips not moving. One of them is Hale, who turned up just in time for formation, standing at the far end of our line, jaw set defiantly. Of course, he didn't join the cheer. We break up to begin the day's activities. First on the docket, drill exercises. We move to the training grounds adjacent to the courtyard. It's essentially a mock battlefield with barricades, trenches, and pop-up target servitors shaped like little green humanoid figures. They used to be orc-shaped, but someone must have swapped the templates to human silhouettes for today's exercise. The idea is to practice defending against waves of attackers. I slot my helmet on and run a quick diagnostic as we take positions. The display inside my visor flickers with a ready status. My helmet is a hybrid of Imperial make and Tau tech, and one of many little luxuries I still marvel at. In the Guard, I was lucky to get a working comm bead. Here I have a mini HUD giving me a readout of my squad's positions and vital signs. Jaren positions our squad behind a low wall. We have a mix of weapons. A couple of us carry pulse rifles, including me. Two others stick with their modified las guns. Malke is one. He claims he's a better shot with it, though personally I think he just likes that it hums less loudly than a pulse weapon. Jaren mans the heavier kit, a shoulder-fired rail rifle, essentially a sniper weapon that can punch through armor. The Tau generously provided a few of these specialized arms to us veterans who proved we can handle them. Hale ended up next to me during the drill. He's checking his last gun's charge pack, face impassive. I decide to try for a little camaraderie, maybe ease the tension. "Hey, Hale," I venture quietly. "Finally decided to roll out of bed, huh?" He gives me a sidelong glance. "I was praying," he says flatly. "Praying, right?" I manage a faint, awkward chuckle. "Well, good that you're keeping the faith," I offer, not really sure what to say. Hale just grunts, his attention already back on his weapon. Conversation over. I sigh and turn my focus to the targets downrange, resolving to catch him in a better mood later, a rare thing these days. A shrill whistle blows. The drill begins. Target servitors start popping up from behind cover downrange, their chunky outlines advancing to mimic an assault. Instantly, the crack of gunfire fills the air, both the pew-pew of las guns and the sharper whine of pulse rounds. The Tau instructors toss in some smoke grenades for effect. Obscuring haze drifts over the field. I fire at a moving target, nailing it square in the chest. The servitor sparks and falls, a hit registering on my visor with a tiny red blink. Next to me, Hale methodically drops 2 targets in a row with precise las bursts. Whatever else one might say about him, the man is an excellent shot. We actually work well in tandem, covering different angles, just like we used to in the Guard. In moments like this, the old camaraderie flickers, muscle memory of cooperation that transcends ideology. But as soon as the wave is done and the whistle ends the round, Hale steps back and the wall between us returns. He starts reloading his pack without a word. The exercises continue for an hour. By the end, my pulse rifle is warm in my hands, and I'm lightly sweating inside my armor. The instructors seem largely satisfied. We had a few hiccups. One of the newer Gue'vesa panicked when 2 targets appeared at once and accidentally shot a fire warrior in the simulation. The fellow's fine, but he'll have a bruised ego. Overall, it went smoothly. Shaz el-Vara himself was observing from a platform, arms folded. He nods approvingly at our unit, which I take as high praise. Tau rarely show exuberant reactions. As we wrap up, I notice Hale staring downrange, past the targets, into the haze of smoke. His jaw is tight, eyes distant. I wonder if he was imagining real Imperial soldiers out there instead of servitors. Or maybe, deep down, he was imagining himself among them, firing back at us. The thought makes me uneasy. We break for a short rest. I grab a canteen from my belt and take a swig of water. It's clean, purified stuff, none of that recycled swill taste. A small grace of Tau logistics. Around me, a couple of the younger humans are animatedly discussing the drill, excited by the prospect of a realistic scenario. They're practically buzzing with energy, like they're gearing up for a competition, rather than preparing for a likely life-or-death war. I envy their enthusiasm, but I can't quite share it. I've seen the real thing too many times. Training against servitors is one thing. Facing living, breathing men who want you dead, who see you as a traitor, that's another. After the exercises, our next duty is a patrol through the nearby city sector, as per the stepped-up security orders. Jaren calls out the patrol roster, and sure enough, I'm on it, along with Malke, Hale, and Lakora. A mixed patrol of 2 humans and 1 Tau. That's deliberate. Integrated patrols present a united front and also keep an eye on each other, just in case. Not that Lakora expects us to misbehave, I hope. He's been nothing but friendly. We grab our gear for urban patrol, sidearms, shock batons, for crowd control, a non-lethal option we carry to subdue civilians without resorting to gunfire, and translator earpieces in case we interact with locals who only speak Gothic or the local dialect. Hale looks particularly unhappy about this assignment. He'd rather train more than play peacekeeper among the collaborators, as he once sneeringly called the civilians who accept Tau rule. The city of Xim Yen Prime lies just beyond the base's perimeter. We pass through a security checkpoint where a pair of hefty KXD-88 broadside battlesuits stand guard, their twin railguns idle but imposing. I always feel dwarfed walking by those armored suits. They're like ancient statues of war gods come to life. They pay us no heed. Automated sensors tracking for genuine threats beyond. Outside the base, the city unfolds in a blend of human and Tau aesthetics. There are structures that clearly used to be imperial, squat hab blocks, an old administratum building now repurposed as a joint governance hall, interspersed with newly built sleek Tau constructions, curved walls, smooth metal surfaces with glowing holographic signage in both Tau script and high Gothic letters. The streets are reasonably clean and wide. Overhead, small courier drones flit about on delivery errands or monitoring traffic. Far cry from the Hive City slums I remember on some worlds. We pass a grand old basilica with Gothic spires and stained glass that miraculously remained intact through the last war. Once a cathedral of the Emperor, now shuttered and silent. The Tau have turned it into a storage depot, if rumors are true, but its ornate facade and stone saints still loom as ghosts of the Imperium, lingering in the heart of the city. Locals tend to avoid that place. I suspect it brings back too many memories. Probably more loyalty and less feeling like you are a captive. That's the general atmosphere for humans under Tau rule. They're explicitly more comfortable and less rigidly controlled than under the Imperium. If you toe the line, anyway. Not everyone sees it that way, of course. It's mid-morning, so the streets are lively. Here, in the heart of what the Tau call an assimilation zone, humans and Tau, and even a few other aliens, mingle in daily business. We pass a team of Earth-cast engineers unloading supplies from a hover truck, while a couple of human dock workers help them, laughing at something the foreman said. Across the street, a gaggle of human children play around a public water fountain under the watchful eye of a young Tau teacher, part of some cultural exchange schooling program. I see one little girl with pigtails chasing a ball that nearly rolls into our path. Malky quickly scoops it up and tosses it back to her with a grin. The girl giggles a thank you in broken Tau before scampering off. Moments like that make me oddly hopeful. That little girl probably doesn't even remember the Imperium's rule, and she certainly isn't afraid of us. To her, we're just the neighborhood watch, not boogeymen. It's the older folks who cling to the past. The young adapt so easily. Perhaps in a generation, people like Hale and I will be the only ones who recall a time before the greater good on this planet. Not everyone shares the neighborly sentiment, though. As we turn down a market street, I catch wary glances from a knot of older citizens by a fruit stall. Two men and a woman, gray-haired and dressed in worn imperial-style clothes, perhaps too proud or stubborn to adopt the simpler Tau garb many others wear. They stop talking as we approach. I give them a polite nod out of habit. They just stare. One man's hand tightens around something at his neck, a pendant under his shirt, probably an aquila or emperor emblem by the shape of the bulge. His eyes burn with quiet hostility. I've seen that look plenty, usually directed at the Tau themselves or the water caste officials. Seeing it aimed at me stings more than I want to admit. In his eyes, I'm worse than the aliens. I'm a traitor to humanity. We move along, not confronting them. There's no law against scowling. They weren't doing anything overtly seditious. But it reminds me why these patrols are necessary. Beneath the surface calm of Xim Yen Prime, there are divisions. The Tau have held this world for maybe a decade now. Young folks adapt easily. They enjoy the new tech, the relative freedom. But some of the older generation and the former Imperial faithful keep the old hate alive in their hearts. They're smart enough not to show it when a Tau soldier is looking directly at them, but it simmers under the polite surface. We turn a corner near what used to be the central square. It's now renamed Unity Plaza, complete with a shiny statue of two hands, one human, one Tau, clasped together. A grand gesture of harmony. Problem is, someone has defaced the sculpture. As we get closer, I see crudely painted letters on the plinth, dripping red. IOM will return. IOM, Imperium of Man. The letters are big enough to read from down the street. The paint looks fresh. It can't have been there more than an hour or two, or the ever-efficient city maintenance drones would have cleaned it. Mark lets out a low whistle. Bold, doing it in broad daylight. Hale's face darkens. I practically feel the anger rolling off him, though whether he's angry at the vandalism or at the sentiment behind it, I can't tell. Before I can gauge his reaction further, Lakora steps forward, frowning up at the graffiti. His translator pendant clicks on as he speaks to us, converting his Tau into Gothic. This is unfortunate. We should report it to local enforcers for removal. Agreed, I say. Let's cordon off the area for now. We can't exactly scrub it off ourselves without proper cleaning gear, but we can discourage onlookers. As we stand guard, a small crowd inevitably gathers at a distance, whispers passing between citizens who spot the scarlet letters. I see a mix of reactions in their faces, some fearful, some grimly pleased. One old lady actually makes the sign of the Aquila over her chest as she shuffles away as if the mere words were a prayer answered. My gut tightens. IOM will return. It's not even subtle. Someone wanted this seen. While Lakora steps aside to radio it into command, I catch Hale gazing at the words with an unreadable expression. His lips move silently, and I realize he's mouthing the words to himself, memorizing them, perhaps, or savoring them. I hope not. I clear my throat. Hale, help me keep folks back. He tears his eyes from the graffiti and nods curtly. Together we politely wave off a couple of curious teenagers who wander too close, telling them it's an off-limits area for now. Under my breath, I say to him, "Idiots are stirring trouble, looks like." Hale responds quietly without meeting my eyes. Maybe they're just speaking the truth. I have to bite my tongue. A sharp retort rises, but I swallow it down. This isn't the time or place to spar with him. Instead, I mutter, "Even if they are, it's only going to cause a crackdown. People could get hurt." He actually smirks slightly at that, which surprises me. "So you do care," he says. Before I can ask what he means, Lakora returns, saying local city security will dispatch a cleanup servitor and investigate. Investigate, right. Hard to find the culprit unless they were caught on pict cams, and if they were, I'm sure they had a mask or something. We continue our patrol. The rest passes without major incident, but the mood is heavier. Even Malkay's usually irrepressible humor is dampened. We all know what that message means. Whoever painted it might be in contact with Imperial agents, or at least emboldened by rumors. It could be just an isolated act of defiance, but more likely it's a sign of something brewing. By midday, we return to base. The sun is high, and the twin shadows of our figures stretch short on the ground as we pass through the checkpoint. I'm sweating lightly under my armor. Urban patrols don't usually tire me out, but today my shoulders feel weighed down, my mind churning on what we saw. We debrief with the duty officer, a water caste named Pour la Gemie. She listens with a serene smile as we report the graffiti and any reactions we observed. Poor Lajemi always has that calm, understanding face, like a kindly aunt humoring children. She assures us they'll increase drone surveillance in the plaza and run a cultural harmony campaign to ease public concern. In other words, more pamphlets about how great life is under Tau. Maybe a public address from the ethereal when he arrives. Hale is silent throughout the debrief, arms folded, gaze distant. When asked if he has anything to add, he just shakes his head. We're dismissed to grab some lunch and a bit of rest before the afternoon war game exercise kicks off. As we walk toward the mess, Malke nudges me. Well, that was a fun stroll. Think we'll get hazard pay for dealing with hostile fonts and lettering? He quips with a half smile. I snort. If only. My heart isn't really in the banter right now. Hale splits off from us without a word, presumably heading to his bunk or some quiet corner. I consider going after him, trying to talk, but I already know how that would go. Instead, I let him go, telling myself I'll try later. We reconvene in the mess hall for a quick midday meal. The fare is simple: steamed rice, some kind of stewed vegetables, and a protein paste that tastes vaguely of fish. The Tau love their ocean-flavored foods. I eat mechanically, the conversation around me a blur. Jaren notices my distraction and raises an eyebrow in silent question. I just shake my head lightly, signaling, not now. He understands and doesn't press. Instead, he fills the silence talking about a new shipment of pulse rifles rumored to be coming, something the younger troops latch onto with excitement. I finish eating early and tell Jaren I'm going to check the armory before the afternoon exercise. He nods, maybe guessing I need some air. Truth is, I just need a moment alone to think. I make my way through the base, nodding to a couple of passing Tau as I head to the armory. It's quiet at this hour. Most are still at lunch or prepping for drills. I step inside the cool, dimly lit depot where our weapons are stored and maintained. Racks of pulse rifles, carbines, a few rail rifles, and other support weapons line the walls, neatly organized. A pair of maintenance drones sit dormant in their charging alcoves. The quartermaster, a pudgy earth-caste fellow, is currently away, probably grabbing his own meal. Fine by me. I lean against a workbench, closing my eyes for a moment. The image of that red graffiti floats behind my eyelids, and Hale's face as he looked at it. Emperor's bones. What are you thinking, Hale? I feel a knot of worry in my stomach. We've been lucky so far, our little Gue'vesa band. Other planets have seen worse unrest. Cronus, I know, was a powder keg of resentment even long after conquest. We thought Xim Yen was stable. Maybe that was naive. I let out a slow breath. In the background, I can hear the distant drone of engines. Could be the afternoon supply shuttle coming in, or just my imagination. For a brief moment, I recall the prayer I used to say before battle, an old imperial litany. Emperor, give me strength. The words drift through my mind and feel hollow. I left those prayers behind, or tried to. But here I am when stressed, defaulting to the old reflex. I open my eyes and stare at the neatly arranged weapons before me. One way or another, trouble is on the horizon. The Imperium might come, or their specter might inspire enough fear to spark revolt even without them physically here. And where will that leave us, the human soldiers, who've cast our lot with the aliens? Caught in the middle, that's where. I straighten up. Enough brooding. There's duties to attend. I pull a cloth from a shelf and start cleaning my own rifle, which I'd set in the armory earlier. The familiar act of maintenance calms me a bit. Checking each component, polishing each scuff. It's like meditation through action. Before long, I'm joined by a couple of others coming to prep for the war game. I exchange a few words with them, keeping things light. No point worrying everyone with my concerns. Morale is important. As I head out to rejoin the unit for the exercise, I catch a glimpse of movement high in the sky through the open hangar bay door. A contrail, perhaps from a high-flying craft, way up in the atmosphere. Could be a civilian transport, could be a Tau air patrol, or something less benign. It's gone before I can even speculate, but a chill runs through me despite the warm midday sun. I have the distinct feeling our peaceful routine is about to be shattered. I just don't know how soon. Scene transition back to battle. The lighting is late afternoon, skies darkening with smoke. Sounds of distant explosions and gunfire intensify. The war game that afternoon never got to finish. Halfway through our exercises, as we crouched in simulated foxholes, laughing about who died dramatically, the real alarm klaxons began wailing. Not the gentle wake-up chime or drill whistle. No, this was the all-out attack siren, a shrill rising keen that froze every drop of blood in my veins. For a split second, none of us moved. We were like actors on a stage when the script suddenly changed without warning. Then Shazel Vara's voice boomed across comms. "All units, this is not a drill. Repeat, not a drill. Man defensive positions. Incoming Imperial forces." Imperial forces. The four of us nearby, Jaren, Malka, Lakora, and I, shared a brief look of recognition and dread. The Imperium was here. The scrawled promise on that statue wasn't empty after all. Chaos erupted as training mode flipped to battle mode. Fire warriors and Gue'vesa alike scrambled off the practice field, racing to the real trenches and fortifications around the city perimeter. The ground defenses we'd carefully prepared over weeks, perhaps subconsciously knowing we'd need them, were now worth their weight in gold. I dashed to the barracks to grab my combat kit and extra ammo. As I threw on my heavier armor plates and slung my pulse rifle, I noticed Hale's bunk was stripped and his gear locker wide open, mostly empty. A cold, prickling sensation ran up my neck. Hale was gone. No time to mull it over. I rushed out, nearly colliding with poor El Souley as she was escorted toward a safe bunker by two guards. Her normally calm face was drawn tight with worry. Civilians, both human and Tau, were running for shelters. Drones buzzed overhead, blaring evacuation instructions in multiple languages. The sky was turning uglier by the minute. I saw contrails and fiery streaks above, probably drop pods or the atmospheric entry of craft. The distant rumble of explosions sounded from the outskirts already. The Imperials were wasting no time. We deployed as per the defense plan. My squad, with Jaren at the head, took position along a series of earthworks south of the city center, overlooking a flat approach that was once farmland. Automated turrets and trench lines pockmarked the landscape there. I remember leaping into the trench, the earth cold and damp, heart hammering against my ribs. Malky landed beside me, nervously adjusting his grip on his last gun. He attempted a grin. "So much for second lunch, eh?" he quipped weakly. I gave a tight nod, appreciating the attempt at levity, even as I double-checked my rifle's charge and the angle of cover. Lakora and another Tau fire warrior took position a few meters down from us. Jaren moved swiftly along the line, barking encouragement and final checks. In those moments, any distinction between Tau and human melted away. We were all defenders of this place, bound by mutual peril. Then came the first thunderous impacts. Earthshaker artillery shells, probably from Imperial Basilisk batteries, set up kilometers away, began crashing around the city's edge. They hadn't zeroed in on us yet, but the concussions rattled my teeth. Plumes of fire and dirt erupted where some shells found targets. One obliterated an empty munitions shed behind us, showering our trench with splinters and debris. Orders crackled over the comm. Hold fire until they come within optimal range of our weapons. Use marker light designations for coordinated strikes. Through the periscope slit of my trench position, I saw shapes emerging from the tree line on the far horizon. Ranks of them. Chimeras, armored troop carriers, leading columns of infantry. The Imperial Guard was coming on foot and track, as standard as ever. Soften with artillery, then massed assault. My stomach churned. I recognized their banner even at that distance, a tattered blue and gray standard with a rearing horse symbol. The 18th Praetia Hussar, if memory served, a regiment known to operate in this sector. I'd never fought them before, but now they were here to kill me. "Steady," Jaren's voice came over our squad channel. I steadied my breathing as he taught me. The Imperials advanced into the killing fields we prepared. Mines detonated, blowing gaping holes in their tightly packed ranks. Several chimeras hit hidden traps or took direct rail rifle shots from our side and went up in flames. But the Guard kept coming, clambering over the wreckage of their fellows without hesitation. I'd seen that relentlessness before. It's terrifying, even when you're not on their side anymore. Finally, when they were close enough that I could see individual faces beneath their helmets and see the hatred etched there, the call went out. "Fire!" We unleashed everything. My world became an unending roar of discharging plasma and the staccato of return last fire. I popped up over the trench lip, fired off a salvo of blue-white bolts, then ducked as a hail of redless streaks answered. Around me, pulse fire from our line lanced out, scything through the horde of guardsmen. I saw an Imperial soldier trip and fall, missing both legs after one of our anti-personnel mines went off. Another stumbled away screaming with half his torso charred by a pulse blast. Still they came, stepping over their dying, firing wildly and shouting curses about Xenos lovers and traitors that hissed and spat through the Vox-amplified din. The battle devolved into a maelstrom of chaos. They reached the first line of obstacles, razor wire fences. Some tried to cut through, others threw themselves on the wire to create makeshift bridges of their own bodies for comrades to clamber over. I'd seen that tactic used against orcs once, but to see human soldiers so fanatical, it chilled me even as I pumped shot after shot into their ranks. It reminded me that I used to idolize such fanaticism. Our Kroot allies sprang their ambush then, hiding in camouflaged pits forward of our lines. A pack of them leapt out with ungodly shrieks, hacking into the stunned front ranks of guardsmen. I glimpsed a Kroot warrior burying his curved blade into a man's chest, ripping upward, blood spraying. The guards around recoiled at the sudden ferocity in their midst. The Kroot fought like animals, giving the enemy a taste of up-close horror. It slowed the assault for a precious minute or two, but mortars and disciplined lass fire soon cut the Kroot down or drove them to scatter back. Most of those savage mercenaries did not return. They'd done their part and paid dearly. Artillery kept pounding us. One shell landed directly on part of our trench 50 meters to my right, where half a dozen human auxiliaries were firing. The ground heaved in a shower of flame. When the dirt rained down, that section of trench, and everyone in it, had been transformed into a smoking crater of mangled limbs and twisted metal. I recoiled, heart in my throat. Malka, who saw it too, let out a choked gasp. "Emperor!" he whispered, then caught himself, as if ashamed to invoke that name now. We couldn't dwell. The Imperials were using the barrage as cover to push closer. Return fire from our heavy weapons was starting to slacken. Some emplacements must have been knocked out. Suddenly, a new sound, a whining screech from above. I risk a glance upward, and what I see makes my blood run cold. Through the smoke trails and flak bursts, a formation of Valkyrie assault carriers is descending toward the city, contrails streaking behind them. They fly in low, multi-lasers and rocket pods already spewing death. One of them fires a salvo that tears apart a communications tower behind us, likely hoping to cut our coordination. "Air assault incoming!" I shout into the comm. Our anti-aircraft guns pivot and open up, peppering the sky with blue flak. One Valkyrie takes a hit to the wing and spirals down, exploding in a fireball on the far outskirts. But others roar past, heading to offload troops behind our lines, maybe even inside the city. This is bad, very bad. Classic Imperial hammer and anvil, ground frontal assault combined with airborne insertion behind. "Janus, Malky, on your feet!" Jaren yells over the tumult. I look at him, muddy and determined. "We're shifting to secondary fallback. Move!" We weren't routed yet, but the plan was always to conduct a fighting withdrawal if overwhelmed. Kauyon tactics, trading space for attrition. Those of us still alive start pulling back in fire teams, covering one another. I slap Malky's shoulder to snap him out of a daze. Together we clamber out of the trench and stumble back toward a low ridge about 100 meters behind, where our second defensive line is set. Essentially more trenches and a few bunker emplacements circling the city. Running under fire is a special kind of nightmare. As I sprint, hunched low, I can hear and feel last bolts sizzling past my head like angry hornets. One misstep or a stray shot and it'd be lights out. My lungs burn, but I dare not slow. Malka is just ahead of me. Jaren and Lakora had fallen back earlier to rally at the next line. About halfway to safety, a sudden whoosh and a blast of heat to my left. A flamer. Emperor's teeth. They've brought flamethrowers. I catch a glimpse of a hulking guardsman with a promethium tank on his back, spewing liquid fear at a cluster of our retreating soldiers. The screams that follow curdle my soul. There's nothing quite as horrifying as hearing a comrade shrieking while burning alive. Discipline falters. A couple of our newer Gue'vesa, instead of falling back in order, break and run outright in blind panic. One is cut down by a pinpoint last shot to the spine. Malka and I throw ourselves into a shell crater as a volley of laser fire chews up the dirt around us. He's panting, eyes wide, face smeared with grime. I realize I'm nearly hyperventilating myself. Training be damned, this is raw terror. I peek out. The flamer trooper is maybe 30 meters off, reloading his pilot light. Behind him, Imperial squads push forward, using the flames and chaos as cover. If we don't stop that flamer, we're done. I signal to Malky, pointing 2 fingers at my eyes, then toward the target. He nods, understanding. Together we steady our rifles over the crater edge. Malky fires first. His last bolt strikes the flamer in the shoulder, causing him to twist with a snarl. That exposes the side of his promethium tank. I exhale and squeeze the trigger. The pulse round hits dead on. In a whoosh of igniting fuel, the trooper becomes a human torch. He thrashes, engulfed in the very flame he meant for us, and a moment later the tank on his back ruptures entirely, exploding in a fireball that flings burning fuel onto nearby Imperial soldiers. A few of them shriek as they catch fire too. A small victory. "Nice shot," Malka breathes, but the relief is short-lived. An instant later, he jerks as if punched. I see a red hole appear on his right temple, and his helmet flies off. A distant crack of a rifle report follows. A sniper. Malky topples into the crater wordlessly, eyes open but seeing nothing. Half his head is simply gone, a scorched mess, where the hot shot last round exited. I freeze, staring at the body of the man who had been joking with me minutes ago. Shock and sorrow and rage collide, threatening to paralyze me. I have to haul myself out of it, literally shaking my head and dragging my body up to run again, leaving Malky's corpse in that shell hole. There was nothing I could do for him. Not there, not then. I reach the secondary trenches, lungs on fire from sprinting and screaming in equal measure. A fire warrior pulls me down behind a sandbag wall, just as another volley whizzes overhead. Jaren is there too, shouting, "Where's Malk?" I just shake my head, still gulping air. His face falls, but he claps me on the shoulder. No time for grief now. That's when a mortar shell lands so close, I think the world has exploded. My ears ring. Everything goes muffled and dazed. I find myself on the ground, not sure how I got there. Someone is hauling me by the collar, dragging me deeper into a communication trench. I realize it's Jaren, yelling something I can't hear. My head spins. There's a gash on my forearm where shrapnel sliced through armor and flesh. Funny, I didn't even feel any pain. Thank adrenaline for that. As my hearing comes back in a rush, I catch Jaren's voice. "Janus, stay with me, kid." I nod, disoriented but alive. The trench here connects firing positions. It's more crowded. A few fire warriors and human orcs are bunched up, catching their breath, checking wounds. I recognize Lakora among them, pressing a bandage to a burn on his leg, but otherwise intact. He gives me a quick nod. I return it. Over the general comm channel comes Shasel Vara's steady voice. "All units, fall back into the city if you are overrun. We will fight street by street if needed. Do not let them encircle. Hold as long as possible." Fighting in the streets, we had tried to avoid that, but it sounds like we have little choice now. And with those Valkyries having dropped troops inside the perimeter, we could be in a vice soon. We continued a fighting withdrawal, pulling back into the outer buildings of Xim Yen Prime as the afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows of ruin and smoke. What had been a clean, orderly city that morning was now becoming a war-torn hellscape. Civic structures burned. I saw civilians amidst the debris, or what's left of them, some who hadn't made it to shelters. In one street, we formed a barricade behind an overturned grav truck and held off a squad of guardsmen until a devilfish APC, one of the few on planet, swept in, its burst cannon chewing the attackers apart. I remember that devilfish skimmer humming almost silently as it glided over debris, in stark contrast to the clattering treads of Imperial chimeras. Its hull was painted in the white and black of our Velka Han's sept, now scorched and dented from battle, but still a welcome sight. The burst cannon on its turret swiveled with precision, spraying plasma bolts that cut down guardsmen in droves before they could react. In that moment, I felt a surge of fierce gratitude for Tau engineering. That floating brick had swooped in like a guardian angel of the greater good. The devilfish disgorged more fire warriors to support us. They moved fluidly, covering corners, herding us Guevesa into defensive positions as if we were part of them. Which, I realized, we were. The lines had blurred completely now. It was just us versus them. By dusk, the battle had devolved into brutal urban warfare. Our forces had ceded the outskirts, but still clung to the heart of the city around Unity Plaza, bitterly fitting. Fire teams of mixed human and Tau darted through alleys, setting up ambushes on advancing Imperial squads. I took potshots from second-story windows, then raced downstairs to help set up a crossfire behind a collapsed statue. The same statue of clasped hands we had seen defaced that morning. It lay broken now, riddled with bullet holes. I wondered if the old man who glared at us during our patrol still lived, and if he now realized what his liberators had brought. It was chaos in those darkened streets. In one skirmish, as we rounded a corner, a hulking silhouette barreled out of a collapsed hab doorway. An Ogren, one of the Imperium's brutish, abhuman shock troops. He stood 8 feet tall at least, with a slab-like torso and tiny piggish eyes gleaming with feral rage. The beast roared and swung a massive spiked club, catching a nearby Kroot merc in the midsection and literally tearing him apart in a spray of blood. We recoiled as the Ogrin charged, shrugging off a flurry of pulse shots that scorched his bare, scarred flesh. "Emperor, protect us!" Someone in our group yelped instinctively, one of the younger orcs who had never seen an Ogrin before. We opened fire en masse, the strobing muzzle flashes lighting up the narrow avenue. The Ogrin took 2-3 hits and kept coming, bellowing in maddened fury. He raised that gruesome club again, intent on pulverizing another of us. Jaren's voice cut through the panic. "Aim for the head," easier said than done on a moving mountain of muscle. But we tried. I squeezed off a shot. The bolt seared into the Ogrin's cheek, blowing off a chunk of his lower jaw. He howled but still did not fall. Finally, a pair of EMP grenades, tossed by one of the Earthcast technicians, of all people, they exploded at the brute's feet. The electromagnetic blast confused the big lout, making him stumble. That gave our firing line the seconds we needed. A concentrated volley of pulse and lass fire drilled into the Ogrin's face and throat. With a gargled grunt, the giant swayed and toppled like a felled tree, shaking the ground as he collapsed. We did not cheer. There was no time. We leapt over the corpse and pressed on, adrenaline fueling our every step. But I remember the stunned expression on that young Ox's face as he realized even the Imperium's monsters could bleed and die. In truth, I think I wore the same expression for a heartbeat. Then training and fury took over once more. The entire city became a battlefield. We fought block by block. Despite heavy losses on both sides, the Imperial onslaught was slowing. We had blunted their thrusts in the tight corridors. Burning wrecks of Chimera tanks clogged the main avenues. Sniper drones perched on rooftops took a deadly toll on any guardsman who stuck his head out. Bodies in gray and khaki littered the streets, alongside blue-armored Tau and our own fallen human orcs. The district smelled of ozone, blood, and charred flesh. A grim-dark canvas painted in red and black. Somewhere amidst all this, the forward momentum of the Imperial Guard stalled. I heard later that their field commander was killed by a railgun shot, sowing disarray, and one of their Valkyries had been shot down and crashed into their own lines, causing chaos. Bit by bit, we began pushing them back out of the central blocks. It was full dark by the time we reached a semblance of a lull. Within the ruined hab blocks, fires cast flickering orange light against the night. We had retaken some ground in a counterattack, and the guard was retreating to regroup beyond the city edge. We staggered into a rough perimeter and took stock. Flickering helmet lamps and the glow of burning buildings illuminated scenes of devastation all around. I saw knots of survivors exchanging terse words, checking ammunition, or bandaging wounds by the light of a flaming Prometheum tank. Out of my original platoon, only a handful remained with me. The rest were either casualties or scattered. We regrouped near the remnants of an old water fountain that somehow still trickled. I caught sight of Corporal Dalen, a fellow Guevesa from another squad, dragging a wounded Tau soldier to cover, both of them spattered in gore but alive. We exchanged weary nods across the rubble, a silent confirmation that we were still here, that the line had held. Someone passed around a canteen, and I realized my throat was raw from shouting and breathing acrid smoke. The water inside tasted of metal and ash, but I drank greedily. Not far off, a cluster of fire warriors murmured in their tongue as they recalibrated a damaged battlesuit's arm cannon. A human medic, one of ours, knelt over a fallen comrade, quietly reciting what sounded like the Emperor's prayer, even as he applied a tourniquet. Old habits die hard, I thought. In moments like these, any prayer feels better than none. High above, I caught a glimpse of two winged shadows flitting across the face of a shattered habdome, Vespid stingwing auxiliaries, their translucent wings buzzing as they searched for any remaining foes. I never thought I'd find the sight of giant insect-like aliens reassuring, but in that moment I did. Even the Vespid were with us, prowling the smoke-choked air for the enemy. We really were all in this together. No formal orders came down yet. Our command structure was in tatters with officers dead or out of contact. We all just knew to hold our ground and be ready. In that lull, an uneasy camaraderie settled on us defenders scattered through the ruins. We had stared into the abyss together and lived. Strangers from different units clapped each other on the shoulder or shared ammunition without a word. The distinctions between human and Tau were practically non-existent now. We were comrades in arms, pure and simple, welded by fire and fear into a single fighting force. As the smoke cleared slightly, a few enterprising Earth-caste engineers began directing anyone able-bodied to gather scrap and debris. Fortifications for the next fight, because we all knew the Imperium might not be done yet. There was no telling if they'd renew the assault within hours or weeks, but nobody wanted to be caught unprepared again. I saw two human volunteers hefting sandbags into a collapsed doorway, and a pair of battered drones lifting metal sheets into place as improvised cover. The resilience on display gave me a swell of grim pride. We were bloodied, yes, but unbowed. Nearby, a group of survivors stood over a collection of bodies laid out under tarps, friends and foes alike, awaiting burial or burning. A burly Kroot mercenary let out a mourning shriek over his fallen kin, a raw, keening sound that cut through the night air. The mingled stench of death and smoke hung heavy over the plaza, the perfume of victory in the 41st millennium. I coughed, trying not to breathe too deeply. Already, small carrion scavengers, scuttling rat-like creatures native to Xim Yen, were emerging from the rubble, drawn by the smell. Morbid as it was, life of a sort persisted amid the devastation. Some distance away, an Imperial guardsman who had somehow survived and surrendered sat under watch, face buried in his palms. On impulse, I walked over. The young man, he couldn't have been older than 19, looked up at me with red, tear-streaked eyes. He flinched, probably expecting me to gloat or harm him. Instead, I offered him a sip from my canteen. He hesitated, then accepted, gulping the water down. Why didn't you kill me?" he rasped hoarsely, voice cracking. I saw confusion and fear in equal measure. This was a boy who'd been told horror stories about what Xenos do to captives. "We're not monsters," I said quietly. "Not the Tau, and not us." I gestured vaguely to the shattered city around us. "This fight, it doesn't have to be the end for you. You'll be given a choice. You can join us. Live a life under the Tau, maybe even fight alongside us. Or remain a prisoner until..." I trailed off, not needing to say until you're exchanged or the war ends. Both prospects were uncertain. He stared at me like I'd spoken in an alien language. Perhaps for him I had. "Join you? Become a traitor?" He looked almost disgusted at the idea, but more than that, he looked lost. I couldn't help a bitter half-smile. Better a living traitor than a dead hero, if you ask me. At that, he just shook his head, tears spilling anew as he turned away. There was nothing more I could do for him right then. I clapped a hand gently on his shoulder. He didn't resist, but he didn't look at me either. Then I got back to work. Whether he'd come around was up to him. He had a future if he wanted it. I hope he realizes that. At that moment, a call came through. Our patrol had located Ethereal on Toriu. The Ethereal had been in the admin hub, the converted governor's palace, when the attack began, and a team of Imperial Tempestus Scions, elite stormtroopers, had infiltrated to capture him. An ad hoc rescue team was being assembled near the old basilica to retrieve him. They needed volunteers. Jaren and I didn't even need to speak. We both just stood and started jogging toward the rendezvous, Jaren with a slight limp from a shrapnel wound. Poor El Sule, alive and well, was there, frantic, explaining how the Ethereal's evacuation transport had been shot down and the Scions dragged him into the basilica. That grand cathedral-turned depot we had noted on patrol earlier was now a battlefield. Within minutes, I found myself part of a scratch team of 8 moving toward the basilica ruins under the eerie light of a burning city. The team, Jaren and I, the humans, 3 fire warriors including Lakora, he refused evacuation despite his burned leg, and 2 drones scouting ahead. Poor El Sule insisted on coming as a translator/negotiator, though she carried a pistol with shaky hands. The basilica loomed ahead, its once majestic spires broken but still reaching into the smoke-streaked sky. The colorful stained glass windows were mostly shattered. In the gaping rose window above the entrance, I could see the faint glow of lights inside. They were in there. We approached cautiously through rubble, quiet as we could. I had reloaded my rifle and taken Malka's spare ammo, still trying not to think of Malka himself. At the massive wooden doors, remarkably intact, we paused. Muffled shouts echoed within, speaking Gothic. Jaren signaled for stealth. We slipped in through a side entrance where part of the wall had crumbled. Inside, the basilica was dim, lit only by a few portable lamps the Scion's eyes must have set up, and the moonlight filtering through holes in the roof. Rows of splintered pews lay scattered. Statues of imperial saints stared impassively from alcoves, bullet-riddled and soot-stained. I peeked around a fallen column and spotted them, a group of 5 figures by the old altar. 4 wore the carapace armor and visored helmets of Tempestus Scions. The 5th was a taller man in a long coat, an imperial commissar, his peaked cap unmistakable, and kneeling at their feet, hands bound, was Ethereal Auntoriu. The Ethereal looked bruised but composed, his white ceremonial robes torn and dusty. The commissar was pacing, pistol in hand, clearly in charge. We were outnumbered, and those were elite troops. We needed a plan. Jaren motioned for us to spread out and flank. We silently crept through the debris-filled aisles, using broken pillars for cover. My heart was hammering. One wrong move and Auntoriu might be executed on the spot. I was close enough now to hear the commissar's snarling voice echo. "Heresy against the Emperor. Your alien lies won't save you." He pressed his bolt pistol to the Ethereal's forehead. "Where are the traitors holding out? How many Xenos remain in the city?" Auntoriu did not answer, merely gazing calmly up at his captor with those large, unflinching eyes. The commissar grit his teeth. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. No more time. I caught Jaren's eye across the nave. He signaled, "Flash grenade on my mark." I primed one of the photon grenades on my belt, hand trembling slightly, but steady enough. Bang! The grenade went off in a searing burst of light and sound, and we moved. Half-blinded Scions yelled in surprise. We opened fire from 2 sides, blue pulse and red plasma streaking through the dark. I dropped one Scion with a burst to the torso. He went down with a cry. Lakora's rifle snapped off shots that punched through another's helmet. The commissar roared in order, dragging Auntoriu down behind the altar for cover. A firefight erupted inside that sacred space. The remaining Scions recovered quickly, elite reflexes. They returned fire with disciplined bursts from their hellguns. A sizzling last round grazed my shoulder plate. Another cracked a stone pillar near Jaren's head. I dashed behind a toppled marble saint, heart pounding. Across the way, I saw one scion tossing a grenade of his own. It clattered and went off. Not a frag, thank the stars, but smoke. A thick cloud began filling the basilica's center, making it even harder to see. Through the haze, I could make out the commissar's silhouette, hauling the ethereal upright, using him as a human, well, alien shield. "Cease fire or the alien dies," he bellowed. Our shooting tapered. No one wanted to hit Toriu by accident. In the relative quiet, the commissar backed toward the main doors, pistol pressed to the ethereal's temple, dragging the dignified Tau with him. I signaled to flank around, moving silently through a side aisle cluttered with rubble. Lakora mirrored me on the opposite side. Jaren kept low, maintaining a bead in case a shot opened. Suddenly, Hale appeared. My heart nearly skipped. Hale was there, near the altar, one of the figures I'd assumed was a scion. His hands were raised, as if placating the commissar. Emperor's mercy. Hale had slipped in with the Imperials, perhaps guiding them to the ethereal. The commissar snarled at him, "Keep them off us, wretch!" and shoved a spare las pistol into Hale's hands. I could see Hale's face in a ray of moonlight, pale, torn between zeal and fear. He glanced about frantically and, "Throne help me," our eyes met across the smoky gloom. For an instant, neither of us moved. Then Hale lifted the pistol, not toward me, but toward Lakora, who was creeping from cover. "Hale, no!" I shouted reflexively, breaking cover with my rifle raised. Hale froze at my voice, torn in that horrible moment between two loyalties. The commissar, seeing his hesitation, cursed and pressed the bolt pistol harder to the ethereal's head. I had a clear line on the commissar's side profile, but Toriu was in front of him. Jaren, from his angle, saw an opening. A single crack from his rail rifle rang out. The round streaked through the air and punched clean through the commissar's arm, blowing his bolt pistol apart and taking a chunk of flesh with it. The commissar howled, stumbling. Toriu seized that chance. With surprising agility, the ethereal wrenched away and dove aside. The commissar, clutching his ruined arm, looked up in rage, only to see my pulse rifle trained on him from about 10 paces. For a heartbeat, we locked eyes. His, one flesh, one glowing augmetic, full of hate. Mine, probably the same. No more hostages. "Drop it," I hissed, finger on the trigger. The commissar's hand twitched toward a knife at his belt. Lakora stepped beside him, carbine leveled. The commissar grimaced, blood dribbling from his arm, and slowly raised his remaining hand in surrender. It was over. The ethereal was safe. Hale stood there, las pistol limp in his grasp, looking utterly lost. Lakora moved to secure the commissar. Jaren approached, weapon trained but voice calm, and said, "Hale, drop the gun." Hale blinked, as if waking from a bad dream. He looked at me, then at the commissar being pinned by two fire warriors. His shoulders sagged. The lassistol clattered from his hand. We escorted the prisoners and the ethereal out of that charnel house. Reinforcements were arriving now that the city fight outside was turning in our favor. A squad of stealth battlesuits emerged like ghosts to guard our egress. As they led the scowling, wounded commissar away, Hale followed in silence under guard, his eyes empty. I found myself unexpectedly choking up. I don't know if it was relief at being alive, joy at saving Toriu, or heartbreak at seeing Hale, my old friend, shuffle away in shackles, caught between two worlds and belonging to neither. There was no time to process it then. We reunited the ethereal with poor El Sule and a protective detail. Toriu, remarkably, gave us thanks. personally inclining his head to each of us who rescued him, human or Tau alike. When he looked into my eyes and said, "You have done the Empire a great service. The greater good thanks you," I felt a swell of emotion I can't quite describe. Pride, maybe, or validation. The sounds of battle have faded. There is an eerie morning silence broken only by distant rubble shifting and faint cries of wounded. A new day is starting, cold and gray. Dawn broke gray and smoky over Xim Yen Prime. The Imperial forces had fully withdrawn in the night after heavy losses. We held the city, for now. A few hours later, ethereal Ontoriu gathered all who could still stand in the shattered plaza for a few brief words. Leaning on a fire warrior for support, his usually pristine robes tattered and blood-stained, he spoke in a strong, clear voice that somehow carried through the morning hush. He thanked every defender, Tau, human, Kroot, Vespid, and otherwise, for their courage. He called us all children of the greater good, united as one. I stood among the soot-streaked survivors listening. When Ontoriu bowed his head and offered a prayer, or what passes for one in Tau philosophy, for the souls of the fallen, I found myself bowing mine as well. Not to the Emperor as I once would have, but simply in respect for my comrades no longer with us. The Ethereal's words were simple yet heartfelt. He praised the valor of the human auxiliaries in particular, saying that our actions would be remembered for generations, that we had shown the true spirit of Talisera, the Tau bond of brotherhood, even though we were not born of their kind. I noticed some of the fire warriors nodding along, casting us humans admiring, even grateful looks. Ontoriu ended with a promise that the Tau Empire would not abandon this world or those who defended it. "Today we bled together," he said, voice ringing out over the ruins. "Tomorrow we shall build together, stronger than before." There was gentle applause, weary but genuine. In that moment I felt a strange swell in my chest. Pride, yes, and also relief. Relief that, unlike the commanders of my past, this leader, alien though he was, actually saw us, valued us. It was a stark contrast to the way the Imperium had tossed us aside. An Imperial general or governor would sooner have executed someone for failing to stop the attack than thank a common soldier. But Ontoriu was different. The Ethereal's speech was brief. Medics soon insisted he tend to his own injuries, but it left a tangible resolve in the air. We few, battered defenders of Xim Yen had done the unthinkable and held off the Imperium's fury, and our leader thanked us for it. It steeled my heart for whatever trials come next. We spent the rest of that morning picking up the pieces. My arms felt leaden as I helped dig survivors out of collapsed buildings and carry stretchers of wounded to aid stations. We formed work parties to clear debris and rebuild rudimentary defenses, knowing the Imperials might be back. Exhausted Tau engineers and human laborers worked side by side, welding scrap into new barricades. I eventually found a moment of solitude amid the rubble of Unity Plaza, near where that Unity statue had stood. Its remains jutted from the ground behind me, a stone hand reaching out of debris as if still searching for its partner. At my feet lay Hale's body on a makeshift stretcher, wrapped in a scorched Tau banner. We had no proper body bags left. I insisted on bringing him back with us. Some of the others looked at me oddly for it. To them, he was a defector to the enemy in the final hours. But Jaren understood. He helped carry Hale out of that basilica himself. I knelt and gently placed something in Hale's folded hands, his old Imperial medallion of devotion, a tiny two-headed eagle icon. It had fallen from his neck when he collapsed. I made sure it stayed with him. Despite everything, it felt like the right thing to do. Maybe the only kindness I could offer him now. Jaren limped over to me, his arm in a sling, but still very much alive, to my great relief. He gave Hale's shrouded form a long look, then placed a hand on my good shoulder. He didn't rush me. For a moment, he simply stood by my side in solidarity, gazing down at the wrapped body. "It should have been different for him," I murmur, my voice thick. It's as close as I can come to expressing the tangled knot of regret and anger in my chest. Jaren sighs heavily. "Hale made his choices," he says gently. "We all do. You try to help him see another way. Sometimes that's not enough." I nod, not trusting myself to speak without my voice cracking. Jaren squeezes my shoulder. "None of this is on you, kid. Remember that." Coming from a man who had seen twice as many battlefields as I have, it feels almost like absolution. I draw in a shuddering breath and manage a faint grunt of agreement. Jaren doesn't push further. We both know the scars of this day, of this war, run deep. But we're alive, and we have to keep moving forward. "Come on, Janus, let's get you checked out by medical," he says after a respectful silence, patting my shoulder. I rise stiffly, and together we walk away from Hale's side. Part of me hates leaving him there alone, but I know I'll be back to see him properly laid to rest. A few steps away, I pause. I find I can't help myself. I turn back and whisper, "I'm sorry, Hale. Emperor. Emperor, forgive you. Emperor, forgive us both." The morning breeze carries my words away. We carry on, all around the plaza. Similar scenes play out. Pairs of human and Tau soldiers embrace as comrades, grateful to see another dawn. A few enterprising Earth-caste engineers are already sketching plans for repairing defenses, talking animatedly with a grizzled human sergeant about where to place new gun emplacements. Life, in its grim way, is reasserting itself. A few meters off, I see that same young guardsman prisoner from the Basilica. He's sitting on a chunk of rubble, hands bound loosely in front of him, guarded by a towering crisis battlesuit that could squash him like a bug if he tried anything. The kid's staring at the ground, looking shell-shocked. Part of me wants to go talk to him again, but I resist the urge. He needs time. In the coming hours, he and any other prisoners will be given the same choice I was once given. Join the Tau or go free somewhere far from here. Whether he'll have the courage to choose life over dogma, well, that's up to him. By mid-morning, cleanup crews, such as they are, have organized. Pyres are built for bodies that can't be stored. The smell of burning promethium and flesh begins to waft anew. It's a familiar stench. I'd hoped to not smell it again so soon. I find myself helping a trio of FEO engineers clear some collapsed masonry near a damaged shield generator. It's mindless work, lifting rocks, tossing them aside, and it gives me time to process. My mind drifts as I labor. I think of that old man at the fruit stall. Did he survive the battle? If he did, I wonder what he'll say of it. Will he thank the Emperor for delivering a brief hope of liberation, even though it ended in fire and death around him? Or will he perhaps reconsider, seeing that we who fought to defend this place, humans and Tau, bled for the civilians here while the Imperium shelled them indiscriminately? Probably not. Beliefs don't change overnight, but maybe his children or grandchildren, who hid in a shelter and were saved by the Tau's victory, will remember things differently. I think of the little girl with the bouncing ball, and I hope to whatever gods or greater goods there be, that she and those other kids made it through unscathed. The thought of children, any children being hurt in this, makes my blood boil. The Imperium would call that sentiment weakness. I call it sanity. A short while later, with the plaza somewhat in order, we gather again for a more sober task, honoring our dead. Auntoriu insists on attending even with his injuries. In a simple, short ceremony, we light pyres and speak names. I step forward to name Hale as one of ours. Some look askance. Perhaps they consider he died fighting alongside the enemy. But Jaren nods firmly at me, and so does Ontoriu. We include Hale. I owe him that. The flames crackle as we salute the fallen. The ethereal gives a final benediction in Tau, hoping that the fallen find peace and unity in the next life. It sounds nicer than the imperial prayer of Enumerator, receive their souls, which always struck me as bureaucratic, like filing paperwork for the dead. With that, the crowd disperses to the many tasks at hand. I sling my rifle and find myself wandering back through the ruined square, stepping over shell casings and shattered ceramite plating. In the distance, on the western horizon, I can make out faint glints of morning sun reflecting off metal. The departing Imperial troop ships, perhaps, lifting off beyond our reach. They came, they killed, they left, and they will be back, sooner or later, with greater force. We all know it. I pass by a broken Tau propaganda drone sputtering half-coherent slogans about unity. I pass a wall where the red graffiti of yesterday, IOM will return, is now charred and illegible from a nearby explosion. I step over blood-soaked rags that someone's already piled as makeshift stretchers. As I walk, I realize something with a faint, tired smile. In all this ruin and grief, my life, our lives, go on. There will be trenches to rebuild, patrols to walk, lessons to learn, even a ceremonial review to prepare for if Ontoriu still insists on coming in a few days. Yes, duty carries on, one day at a time, and so it goes. And you know what? This is my life now. Not an easy one, not safe or peaceful, but mine in a way it never was back under the Imperium's boot. I've chosen it, for better or worse. Will the Imperium return to finish what they started here? Probably. The Munitorum doesn't like loose ends, if not next week, then next year, or next decade. Warhammer 40,000, the historians will someday call this time, an endless war. The thought makes me shake my head with a tired, bitter smile. They couldn't have picked a more fitting name. Next time, they might not just send guardsmen and commissars. Perhaps it'll be the Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's own angels of death, dropping from the sky in ceramite fury, or an Inquisitor leading a fanatical purge. The thought is terrifying, sure, but we'll face whatever comes. We have to. Back on that jungle hill years ago, Commander Farsight gave us abandoned guardsmen a choice. Most of us chose life over a pointless death. Some, like Hale, never reconciled that choice with their conscience. Others, like me, learned to live with it and even embrace it. The Imperium will call me and those like me traitors. And you know what? By their measure, we are traitors. The worst kind. If refusing to kill and be killed for an uncaring tyrant of terror is treachery, then so be it. I'll bear that name and bear it with grim pride. Let them curse my name. Let them brand me heretic. I'll keep fighting my way for the people beside me and for a better tomorrow that I can actually believe in. In the cold dawn light of a world at war, a traitor-turned guardian shoulders his weapon and marches forward, ready to face whatever comes next. There will be trenches to rebuild, wounds to mend, boots to shine for the ethereal's postponed visit. Life will go on in the Tau Empire, even for us human converts, one day at a time. After all, in the grim darkness of the far future, one truth remains. You have to fight for something, or you'll die for nothing. And I've made my choice.